Good afternoon. We'll have Secretary of Health John Weisman with us later. I want to start by paying tribute to our friend John Lewis, and I had the distinct honor of knowing John Lewis, and it really was an honor to know a person who just embodied the best of you could possibly imagine of an American, who demonstrated the power of peaceful protest to change the world. And he did it, and he's still doing it even after his passing, because that spirit has inspired so many people in this country and in the U.S. Congress. And I'll tell you, I haven't served with John for years. When he spoke, and this is a rare thing, people listened, because I understood he was speaking from a higher plane. And I was taken by the last thing he wrote. It was in an op-ed here just a few days ago. He said, "I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide." John Lewis inspired people to live that creed. And to know such a one as him is something that has made an impact on me personally. John was also a person of incredible graciousness. He spent quite a bit of time talking to my son one time who had a project about civil rights, and to be able to talk to John Lewis about civil rights, that was an honor. We're going to carry on your work, John. With that, one of the things we're carrying on his work is to make sure people can vote and make sure that we have a solid democracy as we have come to treasure it. And voting by mail is one important part of this. Unfortunately, there are forces in our nation that want to suppress the ability to vote, to make it more difficult to vote, to reduce the number of people who vote. We have such a distinct, different history in Washington State, and we have demonstrated the effectiveness and the security and the power of mail-in voting. And that's something we should share with the rest of the country. We've done mail-in voting for decades, beginning in 1991, when the legislature allowed anyone to sign up for an absentee ballot. In 2005, the legislature allowed counties to move to vote by mail. And by 2011, all but one county, blue, red, or purple in their ideologies, had moved entirely to vote by mail. And it was then that the state made vote by mail mandatory for all of our counties. And the people of Washington are going to tell anyone who asks, and I wish the president would ask somebody who actually knows of what they speak, they'll tell you that regardless of party, voting by mail is safe, it is secure, and voting by mail improves democracy by improving access to the ballot box, and has such wide bipartisan success and support here in the state of Washington. My office has acted to strengthen that tool by our Access to Democracy package of legislation that passed in 2018, which included automatic voter registration, and the State Voting Rights Act of 2018, of which we are so proud. And in 2019, we successfully shepherded legislation to get prepaid postage available for everyone on ballots. And if anyone is worried about ballot getting lost in the mail, there are official drop boxes to use, so you can deliver it directly to your county elections office yourself. These are just some of the benefits of our system in the state of Washington. It's a system people believe in, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and every other group, because it works. And it is certainly not a reason to delay an election. And I am confident that Donald Trump's hallucination to think about delaying the election is going to be shot down very quickly. So I'm hopeful that our message in Washington State is helpful to the rest of the nation to improve voting. It's just yet another way the state of Washington has helped lead in a bipartisan basis. On a separate issue, we will continue to take measures to help our employees deal with the health risk presented by the COVID pandemic. Yesterday, I extended my proclamation providing protections for employees and workers whether through age or pre-existing conditions, are more vulnerable to the complications of this virus. Basically, our provision prohibits employers from failing to accommodate these workers who would be more highly vulnerable to the virus. And this extension will remain in effect through the duration of the state of emergency or until it's otherwise rescinded or amended. And as we track case data and resume the phased reopening plan, there will come a time when perhaps these protections are not needed. For right now, we need to wrap our arms around these high-risk folks and protect them. And I'm glad that we have done so and will continue to do so. We have some good news on the unemployment insurance front. As you know, we have been working diligently and bending every single effort we can possibly imagine to resolve the claims of people on unemployment that have been waiting sometimes for months. And that's been very extremely frustrating to people. So we got some really good news that I was informed by Susie Levine, our Employment and Security Department lead, that the department intends to finish clearing the backlog of people whose claims were filed between March and June by the end of the day tomorrow. These are folks whose claims have been in adjudication. That means there had to be something cleared up to allow them to be adjudicated as either valid or not valid. And I'm very glad that this is going to meet the target. The job's getting done. The job's getting done because we have hired hundreds of people to do it. We've engaged new technology and new systems, and we want to thank all the people who've been working on it, including the National Guard, who helped clear the identification issue that was troubling so many people. So that's some good news on that front. There is some troublesome news that the Congress may end the extra $600 a week for claimants. And we hope that Senator McConnell will revisit this. Unemployment insurance is an investment not just in the recipients, but it is a benefit for the whole economy of our state and our nation. Because those folks are consumers, they want to pay their rent, and they want to help the wheels of commerce continue to turn. So we're hopeful that Congress will continue this provision. Another front on our effort, I want to just make some comments about our contact tracing system. As you know, it's very important that we're able to prevent the unnecessary transmission of the virus by tracing the people that those who are infected have had contact with so that they can be tested and isolate if necessary. So in that process, we want to give added assurance to people that any identifiable individual information will be kept private, so that if you are contacted by a contact tracer, you can be guaranteed your information is going to be private. That's why later today I will sign a proclamation to specifically exempt personally identifiable information collected by these contact tracers from disclosure under the Public Records Act. So that identifiable information that would be protected, so it would not be disclosed, even under the provisions of the Public Records Act, pertains to any information that identifies or could be used to identify individuals that is obtained by public agencies or public health outreach people in response to COVID-19. It includes the names, birth dates, phone numbers, and addresses of people obtained by the state through contact tracing. And that will not be publicly available. Now, this does not create additional exemptions for public employees conducting contact tracing about their information. The Public Records Act already exempts many types of personal information relating to public employees and volunteers. Now, it seems natural this information would already be protected, and there are strong arguments that it already is under the existing rules, but this proclamation makes it very, very clear so that there's no doubt about it. We will not release your personally identifiable information, and we hope that you will help us in this regard, because this can be one of the most effective tools to prevent other people from getting this disease. And so our ability to fight this disease depends on people's willingness to help the contact tracers stop this chain of transmission. We've got a great number of cadre of people doing the contact tracing. We have trained hundreds of people, and we have the mechanism for them to do this contact tracing. But for it to succeed, we need people to answer the phone and help them with this information. And we hope people will continue to do so. This proclamation should satisfy any personally identifiable information concerns. I want to make a comment about schools. We know that COVID-19, unfortunately, is going to infect us for some time to come. I know there's a lot of concerns about decisions that are now being made. I'll have some more to say about this in the next few days about schools. I know that there are some individual districts making decisions on a daily basis. We have already worked diligently to prepare and implement health guidance for safe in-person instruction, and we've already put those in place. They are in place in the law in the state of Washington already. Those things are, I think, probably some of the most aggressive and ambitious rules that the districts need to meet before they would do in-person instruction, and I'm glad we've done this. But unfortunately, many districts are recognizing that the rate of transmission is not where we would hope it to be to allow full-scale in-site or on-site instruction. So we appreciate everybody continue to work on this, and as I've said, we'll have more to say about that in a few days. In regard to our phasing system of our Safe Start plan, as you know, I've announced that we put a pause on the changes to the phases at this time. So at this moment, we're not going to be able to advance counties through different phases, but we're going to continue to track the data literally on a daily basis. I do note that we are seeing some evidence of success. We're seeing data that widespread facial coverings are becoming the norm. But it's just too early to allow significantly more activities to open up right now. The data is clear on that. I indicated that we are seeing data about increasing usage of masks. This is very heartening. As you know, we put into place a requirement that businesses require patrons to wear a mask, and that appears to have massive compliance. We want to thank the business community for leading on this. We've seen surveys in Yakima and Chelan and Tri-Cities where maybe 90–95% of people who are going into businesses are wearing masks. This is tremendous. And it's tremendous because we have shown that we can really up our game quite quickly. You know, it was only a few weeks ago, maybe a third at most of people were wearing masks. So now to get into the 90–95% level while people are shopping is a tremendous step forward for our state. And it shows how quickly Washington can turn on a dime and do the things that are necessary to protect ourselves and our loved ones. So that's really good news. But there is, as everything, a lot of room for improvement on the social side of our lives. What we're finding is we're being really successful in our business side when we shop. We're in some of those more public settings. But some of the survey results show we might be a lot less than that in our social side when we go to social meetings, backyard barbecues, inside birthday parties, parties of young folks. And that really, you know, we just need to up our game on that. And the reason is that the epidemiologists have been very clear that we need mask usage to be at 90 or 95% in both of those environments for us to really get on top of this pandemic or even to make a significant dent in it. So we've got some good news. Washingtonians are stepping up to the plate big time when they go out shopping and the like. And that ought to give us confidence that we can do similar work when we're in social settings. Because a mask works just as well in a social setting as in a business setting, and it is just as, or maybe even more necessary in a social setting because we're spending more time with people. So there's good news. We know we can do this. We know it works. We know it's cheap. We know it's safe. And we thank people for stepping up to the plate. I'll just close with kind of three comments that I think ought to give us some strength and confidence right now. We know this is a tough time. It has been for months. We know it seems like a long period of time, and it is. But I'll just mention a couple things. Number one, we are all in this together. We are not alone. We have each other to help. and people are helping. Number two, we know that better days are ahead. This is a temporary situation. We are going to get to that shore. We're in a bit of a lifeboat right now, but we are going to get to that shore. And the more we all row together, the faster we're going to get there on masks and everything else. And the third thing I've said is that we know we can make this work. We have flattened the curve once before. We have done this before. We have knocked down this virus. And that ought to give us confidence that we can do that again. So I want to thank everybody for pitching in. We know what we have to do to make this work. We know that physical distancing works. We know that staying home still works as much as possible. We know that healthy habits like washing your hands work. We know that wearing facial coverings when we go shopping works. Now, one of the single most important things we know is wearing facial coverings and maintaining that distancing in our social lives works. And as we increase our efforts doing that, we're going to do a better job beating this pandemic. These are small things, but like any victory, victory is made of millions of small things, and we're all pitching in. So with that, happy to stand for questions.
First question comes from Rachel with AP.
Governor, if Congress is unable to reach an agreement on the unemployment extension, are there any options that you're considering where the state could offset that loss until there's a new federal bill? Because as you know, the cutoff was effectively last Saturday due to how we and other states process these payments.
Well, we have not got any specific plan in that regard. We remain hopeful that Congress will come through. The importance of this is manifest and obvious, should be to all Americans. We have seen that resistance in the Senate at times has crumbled at the end, and we hope it crumbles now. And that has happened. Look, a couple months ago, that chamber, they said masks were for hallucinatory Chicken Littles. Now they're all wearing them. So change is possible. We hope that that will happen in the next few days. We need it to.
Rachel, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Yes, Governor, you noted the improvement to the backlog, but if the ultimate bill involves a change to the amount or the percentage, are you concerned that the state might not be able to configure its UI system quickly enough to avoid additional delays for those seeking benefits?
Yes, I am concerned, and I know governors, both Republicans and Democrats, do have concerns about this. If the Congress changed this system went to some kind of percentage-based system that would require evaluation of individual claims, to reconfigure all of the computer systems, and all of the systems could take weeks or months, and probably would delay this significantly. So we are hopeful that they do not go that route, and they continue this system that actually works and is necessary. Look, the need for this has not been diminished. Who would think that the need for this has been diminished? The economy has not improved dramatically that would allow the diminution of this safety net for families. So there's no reason to change this right now while people are still in these lifeboats.
Next question comes from Joe with the Seattle Times.
A question for the governor and/or Secretary Wiesman. In light of your proclamation on contact tracing, can you just give us a broad sense of how well the contact tracing is working right now, and what sort of how quickly it's being able to get and identify people, or are you just not getting any cooperation at all? And is this compliance varying by different regions or parts of the state?
Well, let me just take a comment, then I'll turn to John. We have the infrastructure, if you will. We have the trained contact tracers. We've trained hundreds of people. They're available. They're doing work throughout the state of Washington, and in many places it's very, very successful. But we do still face some challenges of people not answering the phone, and it's different from different areas. And if they don't answer the phone, we can't help. So this is a request for everybody to pitch in that regard. Now, we also have some problems with testing in a timely fashion, because when the tests are not returned timely, that makes contact tracing more difficult. But I'm pleased, I will say one thing, we were ahead of the curve getting people trained by the hundreds to be available to provide this contact tracing. We have that, and I'm glad that we do. John, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, we just add that the folks in local health departments are working hard on this, and the Department of Health is supporting those health departments that need the additional assistance for the contact tracing. And on any given week, the ability to contact someone within 24 hours of our getting a positive test result ranges from 30% to 100%. And again, a lot of that depends on, are people answering their phones? Are they returning the voicemail messages that public health folks leave for them? The getting the contacts is actually even a better percentage than that. Getting the contacts within 48 hours is usually better. So they're working hard. We need the cooperation of the public, and that's why this proclamation that the governor signed today, or is going to sign, is so important, because it just says again to people, one, this is important for you to participate if public health calls, and you can be assured that your information isn't going to be released.
Joe, would you like to ask a follow-up?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Next question is from Drew with King 5.
Governor, you're scheduled to throw out the first pitch tomorrow for the Mariners. With what's happened with the Miami Marlins, should baseball teams be playing? Football is supposed to start here in a couple of weeks when it comes to training camps. How do you feel about these teams returning for a pastime if there's a potential health danger?
Well, I think that it would only be allowed under the strictest hygienic conditions, and these teams have to be as rigorous as humanly possible. I believe that they have been, and they have to recognize that if they're going to have cases, then they are not going to be able to play. And so that's a decision that we're going to have to follow science. And if the virus gets into these teams, that's going to change their plans. There's no question about that. So we're hopeful that they continue and this hygiene works, and that people remain rigorous to follow the rules. We're demanding on that, and we will expect that to happen.
Drew, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Something that came up in the conference call yesterday, just a clarification. Any chance that you would use your authority to limit alcohol sales? We've limited the time that alcohol could be sold, but is that on a list somewhere that might be a measure you might take?
Well, of course, I wouldn't want to spur a massive insurrection. I say that lightheartedly. At the moment, we're not giving serious consideration. As you know, we have limited that in some sense by closing indoor service of bars, time of service, but outright restriction, no.
Next question is from Jim Camden, Spokesman Review.
Governor, you made the pitch just a little while ago for people to wear masks and refrain from large gatherings, backyard barbecues, things like that. Doesn't it also make sense to ask protesters to refrain from outdoor large gatherings of protests and maybe find another way to push for racial and social justice?
Well, look, I've asked everybody to engage in social distancing and wearing masks. I've done that for everybody in every circumstance, and it's important that people do that. Now, fortunately, we've got pretty good evidence that the protests have not caused a spike in these. There were about 5,000 people who got a test who said they were getting the test because they were in a protest, and the positivity was like 0.1%, extremely low. So the evidence is pretty strong that the protests have not been, thankfully, a reason for the pandemic increasing, and that may be because, from my observations, most folks are wearing a mask while they're doing that, and that's a good thing. But I would counsel everyone in all circumstances to maintain social distancing and masking.
Jim, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Yeah, follow-up. Are contact tracers specifically asking people if they have been at protests within the last week or two?
I don't think they are, but I'm told that King County assessed when people came in for a test, and when they said, I've come in because I was at a protest and I want to get tested, there were about 5,000 of those people, and their positivity was extremely low, like 80% lower than the rest of the population. Is that right, John? Did I describe that correctly?
Right, indeed, in that testing. And in the case and contact interviews, folks will be asked where they've been, have they been in large crowds? And so sometimes that indeed comes up in the conversation. And when it does, that's noted. Some folks at some period of time, I think, were including that as a perhaps specific question, but it's not the usual question. So in the normal course of conversation where we're interviewing folks, finding out where they've been, what their activities have been, those conversations do come up.
Next question is from Keith with Como.
Governor, Secretary Weisman didn't have an answer for what's going to happen with operators. That was supposed to take effect today.
I'm sorry, I missed that. You cut out there.
Secretary Weisman says there's no guidance yet for gyms. That was supposed to start today. What's your guidance for them when they're trying to figure out how many people they can allow in and what they're supposed to do?
Yeah, we're trying to give a more nuanced advice to them. That'll happen in the next few days. We're trying to work with the industry to come up with a definition of what a separate facility is. And we think we can do that in a way that will give them more options and not increase the risk of the virus and transmission. So we're getting through those definitions. Sometimes it's not as clear what one gym is when you have a gym with 3 different segments and a wall between them. We just need to figure out what those definitions are. I'm confident we'll be able to work that out in the next few days.
So I can ask a follow-up.
Yeah, Governor, as far as the bar owners and the restaurant owners, what kind of help are you going to give them if this goes beyond 2 weeks? Some of them are saying they're okay if this is a limited time, perhaps 2 weeks. How long is this limit going to go on alcohol?
Well, we can't give a specific date. It depends on how many people wear masks in their social settings, because the more people wear masks in their social settings, the more we'll be able to open up our economy in general. So it depends. It depends on how many Washingtonians, want to pitch in on this. That will determine when we can open up bars and the like, because that will determine how we can get this pandemic virus under control. As far as help to these businesses, this is something that may be in the realm of the possible. It depends significantly on what Congress does in this relief package. As you know, we already have a $9 billion hole in our state budget, so we are most eager for the federal government to come through. Now, we have some additional funds available from the CARES package, but believe me, there's 10 times as many claims on that as there are dollars in the package from the previous packages. So what I would say is there's some possibility of that. It's largely dependent on what the Congress does as to whether or not they respond to the needs of the states.
Next question is from Austin with Northwest News Network.
Hi, Governor. You have in recent days condemned the presence of federal officers in the state. I'm interested, though, also in your comments and thoughts about the fires, the broken windows, the even explosives that have been used by some. There have been elected officials who protesters have gone to their homes. I think there was vandalism here in Olympia at the mayor's house. There's a videographer who was assaulted in Portland that the Seattle Times recently wrote about. Well, what's your reaction to, or your statement about these tactics and this activity?
Well, I just have to think what John Lewis would think of this, because he was a hero of myself and so many other people who knew him. And he was a fellow that said, you need to stand up against injustice. You can't ignore it. You can't wish it away. And that you should be willing to stand up. And he told a story about the shotgun house that his aunt had, about all standing up against the tornado and the wind. So he was really clear that you need to stand up against injustice. And we know we have systemic racism in our society. We need to stand up against it. And we know that raising the consciousness of people is necessary to change our society. And there have been tens of thousands of protesters who have peacefully protested, asking our community to change. And I think it's had a tremendous effect to raise the consciousness of people. But John was in the ilk of Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King, who recognized the power of peaceful protest and that violence in that system ultimately was not beneficial to the cause. So there has been violence during some of these activities. It has largely not been, at least to my knowledge, of the people who actually were associated with the Black Lives Matter. It was frankly some other different groups. And it's very unfortunate. And we hate to think people can get hurt. So that violence, I would speak against it in all its forms, not only because it can hurt people, but I don't believe it's helpful to the ultimate cause, which is to raise the consciousness of our society to say that we're going to stand against racial injustice. It's already had considerable success, but I hope violence will not continue to mar it. Now, that does not diminish my criticism of the president, who intentionally, repeat, intentionally tried to foment anger by unnecessarily putting federal forces where they were not requested and not needed to foment violence. And he's done this repeatedly, and it's most disturbing. We wish he would concentrate on bringing a little more peace and a little more health instead of distracting from his failure to lead on COVID by trying to promote, in some sense, anger and violence and division. So those are my thoughts.
Austin, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Just briefly on public schools, you said you'll have more to say in the coming days, but you also noted that school districts, including the Olympia School District today, have announced they're going to start the school year doing online, remote learning only. At the end of the day, is this going to be a decision in the hands of the 295 school districts? And what role, if any, does the state have to play at this point?
Well, we have played a role already, and an important one, because we have promulgated quite a comprehensive, robust series of guidelines that the districts have to follow if they are going to have on-site learning. And those are some of the most robust in the country. And they are based on science, and they're based on our knowledge of this virus, and they're based on our love for our kids and our recognition that we are not out of the woods yet. So we already have standards that districts have to meet if they are going to reopen. That's the state component. At the moment, the decisions moving forward have been in local decisions, but they have to meet those guidelines if they are going to reopen. As I've said, I may have some more to say about this in the future, and I'll wait until I come up with that to tell you.
Next question is from Alexis with the News Tribune.
Governor, can you respond to the new GDP report and how it might be influencing your thinking about Washington's economy going forward?
Well, we haven't done a deep dive on this, but it's not shocking to me of what it relays. It relays kind of my general perception of the status of our economy, which is great concern. Certainly the news from Boeing is our most recent concern on top of the COVID slowdown, or as part of, or as a sequelae of the COVID slowdown. So that particular report is not, it's disturbing, but it kind of confirms what our general belief is about what we face in the upcoming days. And it's why I think that we should be so committed and resolute in bending this curve of this pandemic down so we can continue to open our economy. And we know we have to do that if we are going to open our economy. It's one of the reasons in the last week or two we've issued a series of things that we hope will have an action of reducing the transmission of this virus so we can increase our economic activity. We know how important that is.
Alexis, would you like to ask a follow-up?
No, thank you.
All right. Next question is from Carolyn with South Seattle Emerald.
Hi, yes. So I have a couple of questions that are related. One, can you please provide an update on the relief fund for undocumented workers?
Yes, we have made a proposal. We're talking to legislative leaders about that and hope to have that resolved when we get the response from the legislative leadership. And we hope that'll be in days. So the package is complete. We just need some feedback from the legislators.
Would you like to ask a follow-up?
Oh, sorry. Yes, great. Thank you. So in the event that the U.S. Senate doesn't crumble on its position and does impose serious cuts to employment benefits that would start then in just 2 days, if they get a package through, based on what you said to Rachel's question, wouldn't the state be caught flat-footed, plan in place to support an increase in household need? From my understanding here in South Seattle, at least, people are just barely getting by as is right now, and there's a very real threat of homelessness or hunger for many folks, particularly for our BIPOC communities and immigrant communities.
We don't know if we have authority to do this without congressional authority to take that step. And it would depend on what Congress did or did not do. So we need Congress to act expeditiously to solve this problem. And it should not be difficult. It's simply the continuation of the existing system. So we would need Congress to create that authority or change that authority, and we have to see what they do to be able to do that. We can't predict what they're going to do. If they come up with some bizarre system of some percentage that we have no idea about, we cannot design a system for rules we don't know what they're going to be. So in answer to your question, we have to wait to see what Congress does.
Next question is from Jerry from the Everett Herald.
Governor, you talked earlier about the public schools, but private schools are in Snohomish and Pierce counties and other places planning to open for in-person instruction. Are you concerned about that, and will the state get involved if you think they made the wrong decision?
Those things are not definitive at the moment. We're looking at these on a day-to-day basis, so I can't give you a categorical yes or no. Tomorrow I'll be briefed by the Institute for Disease Modeling to give us the most recent update on the status of the pandemic, and that could inform our decision.
Shall I guess to follow up?
Sure. I'm getting some calls about these guest houses and vacation rentals by owners, and they're wondering, the neighbors are seeing them and wondering, are there any rules for occupancy, size of gatherings, and so forth? They see large numbers of people who come to these sort of mini hotels. What are the rules? What do they have to comply with?
Well, the rules are the gathering rules that are in place, and those affect those situations as it does any setting. We just can't hang around with, 30, 40, 50 people in these circumstances. It's just too dangerous. And frankly, that's going on right now, and it's why we're having a difficulty. So, and it's not just guest houses. I hate to lay it off on the Airbnb. It's throughout our community, frankly, and that's why we're experiencing what we are experiencing. So in answering your question, I don't want to suggest that's the source of the problem. It's maybe 1/10 of one problem. We're just seeing way too much social interaction. It is understandable. It is attractive. It is fun. It is frivolous. It is consistent with the sunshine, but it is dangerous. And that's the situation that we're in. Now, we're not the only state in this situation. All across the United States, we're seeing this happen. Fortunately, we're in much better shape than many, many other states. Most recently, we were about 30th or 35th in the nation as far as our percentages of infections. But we do not want to get it out of control like Florida experienced. And that's why we're trying to be so diligent on this.
We have time for one final question.
Our last question comes from Hannah Scott, and I will read it out. Casinos remain open without new restrictions in place that took effect for everyone else today on bars and restaurants. Are you having conversations with them about them implementing further restrictions?
So I have made clear that it would be most helpful if we reduce physical interactions that are not protected by mask or distance. But as you know, the tribal communities are not subject to our jurisdiction, and the state does not have authority to regulate those activities.
Great. And one final follow-up from Hannah for Secretary Weisman. I'm hearing from people concerned that multiple tests on the same person are being double counted in daily test results. Can you address that?
So when we get test results in, we run them through an algorithm to deduplicate test results. So our efforts are to actually make sure we're only reporting one test result on folks. And there are people who are getting multiple tests also on different days as they are sometimes trying to determine if the virus is cleared. But again, we take those tests out as well as duplicate negative tests as well.
My final words are thank you, wash your hands, mask up. Take care.